And I apologize for the link not being so visible with all my other verbiage on there. I apologize. Okay, let's start with our blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Dale, thank you so much that you have, maybe you could just give us a class sometime on how to find all these amazing things and to put behind there, but I really appreciate it. So as we can tell, we have a Chag HaShavuot, the holiday of Shavuot, which is starting on Sunday night. And we have the giving of Torah. We also see it in the field there. I'm not sure if that's meant to be the fields of Ruth, where she was picking, since we read the book of Ruth, if that's the leket that we have, but it's all good. And it's also the midbar of the desert of the wilderness where we received the Torah. And hello to Darlene from Israel, and everybody should be safe. And we dedicate our learning today. You can always dedicate it to multiple things. We dedicate our learning today to the refuah shlema of people who have been injured in the attacks, people who are still recovering from the tragedy in Meron, and for the safety of all of Am Yisrael everywhere. Just so we know that Israel is bearing the brunt of all this, but Jewish people are being attacked around the world as a basis of this, like in New Mexico. Like, what does that have anything to do with anything? But the Jewish people, it's very, very alarming, but we are literally all in this together. And so our learning should be in the merit of all that. My nephew was sent to the border of Gaza last night. And I know everybody else has relatives and friends who are different places. Everybody should just be safe. And we should be privileged to celebrate our holidays in peace and tranquility, because as we were meant to. So God willing, we will be able to do that. So for this next hour, we will dedicate ourselves to learning and putting it maybe in some sort of a bigger perspective to help us understand not just the situation or any situation per se, but an overall global perspective from the beginning of time, kind of a perspective. So I'm very indebted to Rabbi Daniel Gladstein for parts of this shiur, as well as he got it from Rabbi Eli Mansour. So this is just a little bit of what I wanted to share with you, and hopefully it will inspire us to broaden our lens to see things from a wider perspective that we can go forward with. Okay. The holiday of Shavuot, which celebrates the giving of Torah to the Jewish people. How significant of an event was that? It was not only the most significant event in the world for the Jewish people, it was really the most significant event since the beginning of creation. And it was understood to be the reason for creation to be able to move forward was if the Jewish people would receive the Torah and observe it. So some of you, I'm going to talk about some Kabbalistic terms that some of you may have heard before. And since we are starting the book of Numbers, even though we call it's Bamidbar, which means in the desert, it is called Numbers because it starts off with a census of the Jewish people. But the numbers we're going to talk about are a different numbers. How many of you, just like raise your hand, how many of you have heard the term of the shattering of the vessels, going back to the beginning of creation? Kabbalistically, it says that there was a spiritual light and it was too great for the kalim, the vessels, and so it shattered. Okay, so the shattering of the vessels, it says, and what was that? So we tend to think of glass, glass shattering. It says, but what happened when that shattered? The light that was inside was spiritual light, and they're called sparks. These are the sparks that were then flung out throughout creation. And that has been the purpose of all of creation from that time, has been to collect the sparks and have them be able to be in a vessel that could hold it. And that has been the job of humanity and has been given as the specific task of the Jewish people. So this is fabulous math And I have to say, I was doing something else. I don't have the sources for this, but this is all through the Kabbalistic sources. You might want to know, so how many sparks were there? How many sparks were there that got shattered? Or was it just like infinite, like shards of glass? Like who knows, who could count? And the answer is no. There was a specific number of sparks that were then flung out into creation and were out there. How do we know how many there were? So if you have a chumash, we can go actually back to Bereshit, where it is hinted at. Bereshit is hinted at, and that is literally chapter 1 on page 2 if you have the stone chumash, and probably not too far from that if you have any other kind of a chumash. But on the phrase where it says that the verse 2, when the earth was astonishingly empty with darkness upon the surface of the deep, and the divine presence hovered upon the surface of the waters. Hovered. That word mirachefet. Mirachefet means to hover. That word is understood to be a hint to the number of sparks that are out there. What is the number? It's the middle 3 letters, which is the root of the word mirachefet. And what is the root of that is resh, chet, pei. Resh, chet, pei. That is the root of the word mirachefet. Mirachefet is the verb form in the present tense, mirachefet. The gematria of that root, resh, chet, pei. Resh is equal to 200. Chet is equal to 8. And pei is equal to 80. Mirachefet, that word, that rachef in there, is 288. It says that's how many sparks were spread out. If you look at, hold on, somebody in here. And just like I can't measure and talk at the same time, I can't do math at the same time as doing something else, to multitask. Okay, so that word is a hint of how many sparks are out there. It says, and who was supposed to collect them? Who was supposed to find them? It says that was given to humanity. It was originally given to Adam and Chava to do, but they did not succeed in doing that. It was given to Noach to do, and he did not succeed in doing it. It was given to Abraham and his descendants, and the Jewish people are meant to collect the sparks. So collecting the sparks is like, what does that even mean? It means that there are aspects of holiness that are now spread throughout the world that need to be returned to their proper place. So now we're going to jump ahead to when the Jewish people are in Egypt. The Jewish people are in Egypt, which we knew that we were going to be sent into some strange land. It's like, why would we be sent to some strange land and that we would be oppressed, but then we would leave with great wealth? Is this, I mean, what does that even mean? Is that I'm going to reward you, you're going to leave with great wealth? So it's like, what was the wealth? It says the wealth was really the sparks that were in Egypt. It was the greatest country, the greatest civilization at the time, and it had many great things, and they needed to be extracted. And that was the wealth we left with. It's embodied in another thing that the Jewish people also left with. It says, who accompanied the Jewish people? It wasn't just the Jewish people who left. It says there were some other folks who came with us, and they were called the Erev Rav. The word Rav, which means a lot, like a rabbi, says the gematria of that is Resh, which is 200, and Bet, which is 2. 202 we left with. It is understood that we left with 202 sparks out of Egypt. Now here's the higher math. If we had 288 and we got out 202, how many are left? It should be 86. 86 sparks left for us to collect. You say, okay, great. Most of the work is done. We got a big chunk done, but now we're going to have a little bit more to do. Who is supposed to do it now? The Jewish people are supposed to do it. And how do we do it? It says, we do it when we stand at Mount Sinai on Shavuot, and God gives us the Torah. It says the Torah is the path for collecting the rest of the sparks throughout creation. What is later going to be the exile of the Jewish people into all of the nations around the world is to collect those sparks. And when we are done collecting the sparks from those nations, then we leave. Then we leave. In our davening, we talk about the ingathering of the exiles, right? That Jewish people will be gathered from the four corners of the earth. This is not just the Nefesh B'Nefesh program of like, we're going to, this is not the Jewish Agency, Aliyah, we need to get all the people here. It is the people who will, from their countries that they have come from, bring what are called the sparks of holiness from whatever nation they have come from, to bring it back to the land of Israel so that all the sparks can be collected, not for our use alone, but so that they are concentrated and can be used in the way that is holy, because a spark that is someplace else is a quality that is being misused. It's a great quality, but it's being misused and it needs to be restored to the side of Kedusha, to the side of holiness. That's our goal. And then when we put that all back together again, then we end up with the world perfected. The world will be perfected. That 86 is another gematria. So this is a class of numbers. The numbers. So we started off with the 288 sparks, which are derived from the root of the word tahaver, resh chet bet. Resh chet pei equals 288. In Egypt, we got out 202, leaving us a remainder of 86. 86 is, Dale, I can see you mouthing something. If you want to unmute, or you know what the 86 refers to?
Yeah, I put it in the chat, Elohim.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much. Elohim, which is one of our names of God. We have the Yud, He, and Vav He name of God, which we pronounce Adonai. When you say Yud, He, Vav He, we say Adonai. Elohim is the God of creation. It's the God on the side of judgment. It is the God that is the name of God that appears 32 times in the first chapter of Genesis, that is the creator. It is the name of God who is mentioned to us in the giving of Torah. We tend to think that giving the Torah, this light, nice, beautiful, spiritual, uplifting, amazing, we're all together. Yes, and yes, and yes, and yes. But did we ever say, like, Lama, for what? What is the purpose? Why is this such a big deal that the Jewish people are getting the Torah? So now, if you want to go to Parsha Yitro, which is where we close it. So Parsha Yitro, when the Jewish people stand at Sinai, on Shavuos. If you turn to page 407 in the Chumash, or if you're in a different Chumash, turn to chapter 20 of Exodus. Chapter 20 of Exodus, right there, okay? Now, we sometimes don't really pay attention to the different names of God being used. It's like God, Hashem, 6 of one, half dozen of another. But we need to know that there's the different names are used for different reasons. So in chapter 20, verse 1, when it says, God spoke all of these statements saying, this is God saying the 10 commandments. If you go to the Hebrew, Vaidaber Elohim et kol hadvarim ha'ele lemor. And then it says, that is the God who is speaking, the God of creation. And that name, the God of 86, is speaking. Yud He Vav He has a gematria of 26. Elohim has a gematria of 86. It's the 86 God that is speaking, that aspect, which means I am about to give you the keys to the treasure chest here, the keys to how do we get the rest of the 86 sparks that are still throughout the world. So, it's kind of like on a test, they start out with the easy questions and you thought you were like, oh yeah, I got the first, 150 multiple choice, but then it gets to the essay questions at the end and those are fewer of them, but they actually are harder. The final 86 are harder. Marjorie.
Yes. Could you explain a little bit how we got the 202 out of Egypt?
Yes. So the 202, it says by the Jewish people being there that we extracted from Egypt the qualities of Egypt that were beneficial. Now, what those exactly are is a really good question. I don't know. I'm going to make a very meek attempt to draw a corollary, which is when people make Aliyah to Israel, when our kids made Aliyah, I think it was when our kids made Aliyah, and they were greeted by members of the government, and somebody was greeted by Netanyahu. I don't know who was speaking. And he was greeting them, and they were all Americans who had come. And he said, "We are so looking forward to you contributing the best of what America has to offer, like customer service." That's what I mean. Of course, everybody laughed. That is what that's America. Or I don't know. You might say it's whatever you might say. People say half in jest, half in whatever. But it's like every nation has a quality. It's like we're very just as much as we spoke about, or I don't know, getting kind of the days are blending together. In this week's Parsha, I'll just kind of say this as an aside, as a basic concept. We are very big on there being differences that are important and valuable that need to be preserved and focused and directed in a positive way. So the tribes makes a very big deal. This is why this Parsha makes me cry. I love this Parsha because it describes the encampment of the Jewish people, preserving the uniqueness of each individual tribe. They each had their own banner. They camped together. They each one had their own stone in the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol, because each one gets a different blessing from Moshe and a different blessing from Yaakov. We don't have the idea of we just need to have why does it have to be different this, different that? It's like, no, all of these things are important. The different minhagim that people have, the different customs that people have. You came from Germany, you'll even see in a prayer book, sometimes it'll say, the Sephardim do this, the Jews from Frankfurt on Main do this. And it's like, why can't we just all do one thing? It's like, because we're not supposed to. God created a creation that has variety, and that variety is not meant to be homogenized, but it is meant to be unified. And the encampment is the unification where all the tribes are different, and it's preserved their differences, but they are all focused on the centralizing force of the Mishkan. That's what allows any quality to be able to be directed and focused and productive and contribute to the benefit of the whole. Societies throughout history have messed it up. It's either like anarchy, everybody do what you want, and it's all about the family or the tribe, or it's all about the central government and everybody lets go of their differences for the sake of the whole. Either one of those is wrong. They both end up with cruelty, murder, and it's self-destructive and destructive of others. The only pattern that works is this one in Bamidbar. The only one that works is this one. Preserved differences, appreciation of it, all around a central unifying force that brings out the best of everybody. So the same thing that we experience in the microcosm of the Jewish people is meant to be for humanity. That's why we're very big on listing the 70 nations, the 70 languages. In order to be part of the Sanhedrin, you had to speak 70 languages. You had to be able to understand, because if you don't understand someone's language, you don't really understand them. So if you had to be able to speak that so that you could have that variety. So this is, yes, it's helpful when you live in a country to speak the language of that country. And it's also beneficial to be able to speak many languages, because that's the variety that God put in. That is what God wants from us. So the sparks from Egypt, I'm not sure what it was. Maybe it was in their, I don't know. So that's a really good question, is what is it? I mean, sometimes we have almost like a stereotype of what a country is. What are the Italians? What are the Japanese? What are the Chinese? Maybe, I don't know. I don't know if it's at the level of what we consider even almost at the, as I said, the kind of superficial level, but maybe it's something. I have to tell you, when I lived in California, and I was never, I'm going to say this, I never considered myself exactly artistic in the art, like painting or drawing or anything like that. And my 5th grade class, there were a lot of Asian kids, Chinese, Japanese, and I sat next to, I remember their names. I remember Tetsuya Sakido and Cheryl Nakata and Belinda Wong. They were at my table, and we were given an art project, and I just sat and looked at what they did. I felt like a kindergartner next to them, like with those like big crayons. They're doing like all this beautiful, like what you associate with, I don't know. And I'm not saying that every person who comes from those countries has that. I'm just saying it's a quality of the place. And it's like, that has a place. That has a place. So everything belongs in the picture, and the Jewish people are responsible for putting the picture together. We are not one of the 70 nations. We are the Mishkan in the center, and that's not like a self-centered kind of thing. Our job is to show everybody how it can all be put together and how it can work. That is the Or LaGoyim. That is the light unto the nations. What does it look like when it works? That's why our holy place is a city. Yerushalayim is called Ir HaKodesh, a holy city. It's not Machu Picchu. It's not a Vatican. It's not any of these things that are remote and like closed off from like the laity. They are places where we see, what does it look like when you go to the cleaners or when you go to get a picture frame? What does it look like when you go to get your car repaired and people are doing their thing, but in a framework from Torah? That's what we're trying to show people. It is not that they become Jewish. It's not that they drop who they are. It's how do they put it all together? And that's our idea of redemption. And that's our idea of collecting the holy sparks. And that is how we understand even, you can talk about the political thing and the historical thing that led to the Jewish people being flung out across the world. But that's the same thing as bringing it. Then we go to these places, we're in these places, and we're like ambassadors, and we're spark collectors. We are spark collectors, we are treasure hunters, and to bring it back and put it to the side of Kedusha. That is our goal, is to make sure that all of these things are used in a way that is appropriate, that is within God's framework of how these things need to be used. So God gives us the Torah with the name Elohim. I'm giving you the Torah from the name of 86. Those are the remaining sparks that need to be collected, and that is your path. And that's what I'm giving you to do. When we stand at Shavuos and we accept the Torah, basically we are accepting. This is like, feels a little bit like Mission Impossible. Yes, I did. The source for this shiur so far is from Rabbi Daniel Gladstein on Torah Anytime, and he got a lot of it from Rabbi Eli Mansour, which I don't have the source for him, but I mean, I've heard him before. So, and it's all source. Rabbi Gladstein has all of the sources. So if you wanted to listen to that on Torah Anytime, it would be very beneficial. Okay. Any other questions just so far? I know this is kind of like not necessarily something we normally talk about, but feel free to unmute and ask. Yes, Andy.
I'm unclear what the sparks are that we're supposed to be looking for.
So thank you. The sparks that's a very good question. It's like, okay, is this a spark? So it's being able to notice that in everything that there is a spark of holiness. So I'll give you an example. One way we release sparks of holiness, even just in our own lives, says when we make a blessing over food that we eat, we release the spark of holiness that is in there. Now, does this mean if I eat 86 apples and make a bracha over in that, I'm like, done, got my 86? It's like, no, it means that's the process. So 86, I think, is like a super number. It's not that we're looking for 86 people or 86 things. It just means that that's going to be, some people say, I'm looking for the good. I'm looking for that which is redeemable in every situation and to bring it to the side of holiness. The person who represents that, it's like, what does this mean? The person who represents this is Ruth. Ruth is the spark of holiness from Lot. If you remember the story going back, Abraham had a nephew, Lot. It was his brother's son. His brother died. He took Lot in as like his own child. Lot grew up with Abraham, but then Lot didn't exactly, he got part of the program, but not all of the program. As you remember, when he lives in Sodom, he's very good at inviting the angels in to be his guests. And then he's very bad at offering his daughters to the men of the city who want to rape his guests. Like, no, take my daughters instead. They've never had relations with anybody. It's like, that is not how we do it. And then when the destruction of Sodom happens and Lot's daughters end up sleeping with him in order to conceive, because they thought they were the last people in the world and they needed to preserve humanity. It says Lot knew that wasn't true, but his daughters didn't. And he was asleep or drunk, kind of like this. Like, that's how he didn't know what was going on. His daughters didn't, but he did. So he'd say, Lot, where is he in our families? Like, can we write him out of this story? Like, seriously, who wants him in this story? But God says, I found my Mashiach. I found my Redeemer in the fields of Moab, in the fields of Moab. Moab was the name of the child that Lot's daughter had with her father. That's what the name means. May-av, from my father. Not even disguising it at all. This child I conceived with my father. Okay, that was not something that like, oh, well, that was acceptable then. That was not acceptable then. That was not acceptable. She names him that. The Moabites, who end up being the epitome of the anti-Avraham life. They are the ingrates, and they're not allowed to, the male Moabites are not allowed to convert into the Jewish people. They represent the worst. They represent the worst. However, there's a spark of holiness there because he is from the family of Abraham. He's from the family of Abraham, which means there's a spark of something that needs to be redeemed, and it's going to be redeemed through exactly one person, and that person is Ruth, the Moabite, and she's the one who joins the Jewish people, and it's from her that we end up with King David and the line leading to Mashiach. Mashiach is the final way, the final, like when this will all, the sparks will all be gathered together, is represented. That's called Mashiach. When we talk about Tikkun Olam, the repair of the world, you can understand that perhaps from this way, is what we're looking to do is, this isn't necessarily like, just write checks to save the whales. That's not Tikkun Olam. Tikkun Olam is where the rest of the sentence, Tikkun Olam, the rest of that sentence is B'malchut Shaddai, under the kingdom of God. That's what that Tikkun Olam is. We take the world and we get it reoriented with a God focus, the way God wants us to be running it. And it's how he wants it to be run is what we're given in the Torah, how he wants the Jewish people to be running our lives, as well as how other people are supposed to be running theirs. It's not that it's just us and we don't care about anybody else. And it's not that they all have to be like us. There is a path, the 7 laws of B'nai Noach, the laws of Noach, which are incumbent on all of humanity. And they're basic laws, which we call civilization. That's what we used to call it, civilization. And that is, when that happens, that is the Tikkun Olam B'malchut Shaddai. And people don't have to necessarily know. They think they're doing it because their grandmother taught them how to be this kind of nice person. That's fine. So the question here, a connection between Mashiach and Mosaic, you meaning, okay, Mashiach and, I'm not sure what Mosaic means. Rachel, do you want to unmute and say more about what you're asking?
I'm just thinking about how you're talking about how all the different treasures need to come together. And
Yes.
that's similar to a mosaic. And
Oh, a mosaic. I'm so sorry. You're so
probably
cute.
didn't spell it the right way. So when we look some mosaics, we know that first of all, they're all different colors.
Yes.
And mosaic pieces are different shapes. And some people make mosaics with stones and rocks and glass and all kinds of different things. So there's all kinds of stuff in there that makes one picture. So that's just what I thought of when you said what Mashiach means is all of these things coming together. I thought of a mosaic.
You are so cute. Now, you have to know that Rachel Mashori is an actual real artist, and she doesn't just play one on TV, that she is an artist. And so she, of course, would have this beautiful connection. So yes, and yes, I love that. And that's what we said. So there was a rabbi, oh, I forget his first name, Yitzchak Feldheim, who gives a beautiful shir, a beautiful class about the difference between rainbow and white. And I don't mean rainbow like how it's currently being used in by different groups, but the idea of a rainbow of multicolored is the Jewish idea. White is the idea of many other religions, that there's an idea of that's why you have to believe in Jesus in order to be saved. You have to follow blah, 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 Sharia in order to be blah, blah, blah. All these things, like everyone has to be the same. That white means homogeneity and uniformity. Rainbow means all the colors are essential and need to be there together, unified. That's the difference between rainbow and white. So our idea of purity, like the perfection of the world, is rainbow. It is not white. So yes, Rachel, yes, it is Mashiach is the one who's bringing together, and he represents kind of like the last piece. It's kind of like, what's the piece that's really missing? It's the piece where I thought like, wow, how are we going to redeem this? Where is the redemptive piece in here? How can we reclaim it? You know, I almost see it like even our efforts in recycling and reclamation and renew, reuse, rebuild, whatever, is almost kind of a mental framework for this idea. It's like the goal is not to discard. That's the other thing about white. The white idea is we get rid of everything that doesn't fit. We get rid of you and we kill you, or we get rid of you or you're going to hell you if you aren't part of this picture. Whereas that is not Judaism's message. Judaism's message is you have a place in this picture. There might be some things that need to be modified here. And you might need to let go of some of these little pieces that you have in here that are not true. But it is, you have a place in the picture and we need you. We need everybody. And that's the goal, which is why our idea of Mashiach is not a rapture where all the believers get to go someplace else and everybody else gets to disappear. Ours is everyone gets the message, gets the text, and is like, oh, I didn't realize that's what you meant, and that we all have a place here. That is what the Torah is for, which is why Torah is called light. Okay, Torah is light. It's called Torah, or the light of Torah is meant to be this light that we spread to all of humanity. So on one hand, we're collecting the sparks, and I don't literally mean, so like what Andy was asking about. So what does that mean? It means, where's the spark that is in, you know, sexuality? Where's the spark that's in food? Where's the spark that's in business? Where's the spark that's in art? Where's the spark in, you know, you can have art that is, it doesn't have to be a depiction, you know, of the Torah, but there's art that is abominable and should not be created. There is art that is completely inappropriate. Now, in our country, you know, we're not supposed to censor anything, but there is choice about how do you use your creative energy? What do you make out of that? Or going back to the Egyptians, they understood building really well, but what did they build? They built things that were tributes to death. You know, those pyramids were for their rulers to go into. That, you know, they would take their riches to go to the next world and whatever's like, you're great builders. Why are you building that? Why are you building that? So that's the question, is all of the efforts, all of the human gifts, talents, and everything else all have a way of being directed and focused in a way that is constructive, productive, and holy, and holy. And another artist I see, actually, we have many artists here. Actually, I forgot, I didn't mean to just single out one person. We have other artists with us today as well. So this is, the Jewish people are the ultimate spiritual artists, and we are trying to create the tapestry of humanity for everyone's benefit. And we're here to serve. We are here to serve. So just like the Kohanim are the priests for the Jewish people are the Kohanim for humanity. That's why it says when we give the Torah, you are Mamlechet Kohanim. You are a kingdom of priests, a Goy Kadosh, a holy nation. And it's not meant to be like, we do our own thing and good luck to the rest of you. It is meant to be, and we bring you all, everybody together. And that's our goal. And when we have this Elohim numbers of this 86, and we can complete the package to 288, we will, says it reaches the time, because Mashiach is also associated with a time when there will be no more death. Okay, that then we will have the eternity that we're supposed to. Don't ask me any questions about that. I don't really exactly understand what that means. But if we go back to Genesis and you go back to that word mirachefet, that word page 2, it's right next to the letter gimel in the Hebrew, mirachefet. If you take the resh, chet, and pei out of mirachefet, on one end you have a mem, and on the other end you have a tuf. That spells the word mate, which means death. Okay? It says that when all of those sparks are reconnected, we will then have mirachefet of God's presence hovering, and we will no longer have death in the world, that there will be eternal life. And that's, now you can talk about death in the actual death, or you can talk about something that is death bound. So we know later in the Torah, we are told, and it's said, I've placed before you life and death. Choose life. So what idiot is choosing death? Okay, so of course we would choose life. But what does that mean? It means to choose the path of Torah. That's the path towards life. And the other is not. It's going to get you in the other place. Doesn't necessarily mean you're being struck by lightning or dying, but it's a disconnect as opposed to a connected life. You want a disconnected life or you want a connected life? Choosing life is called Mayim Chaim, living waters. When we choose Mayim Chaim, the living waters, that's called choosing life. This doesn't mean that you live to 120. It could mean that your time is in the next 2 seconds. It doesn't have to do with how long you live. It is like whether you are connected to the life force, maybe that's better, connected to the life force or the death force. Like which side is fueling you? What side is energizing you? Because there's 2 different energies. There's the life energy and there's the anti-life energy. And so we want to be on the side of the life energy, and that's choosing life. So we are given that choice at Sinai, and God is specifically talking to us as it says God, but the word is Elohim, and I'm giving you this path so that you can do it, so you can collect these sparks. And we're going to read the book of Ruth also at Shavuot, because she is the one who is almost there. And when we say that she's like almost there, that she's the person, so we know there's a spark. One of the things it doesn't say, it never says that she had a different name when she was a Moabite princess. It always identifies her as Ruth. Her name is Ruth. Resh, Vav, Taf. So I love this because it's my middle name, Ruth. But that's 3 of the 4 letters of the word Torah. All you have to do is add a hey. Okay, hers is Resh, Vav, Taf, and Torah is Taf, Vav, Taf, Vav, Resh, Hey. Just like turn it around and add a hey. She is the Torah. She becomes the embodiment of that. It's like, wow, you're the embodiment of that. You came from a place that was like never looking there for sparks. It's like, well, you don't know where to look. Okay? Even King David himself was the reject of his family. To really read in the book of Samuel, to read about King David, there's a whole other story kind of behind it, but he was considered the unwanted one from his family. So when God tells the prophet Samuel, go to the house of Jesse, Yishai, to anoint the next king, because Saul is not going to be king anymore, anoint the next king, go to the house of Jesse, and one of his son. And this is this is like, I don't know if this is the basis for the Cinderella story, but it would make a good counterpart to it, is Jesse had a number of sons. And there was like tall and handsome son, there was strong and blah blah son, and I don't know, all these different sons. And Jesse parades them out, and God is like, not him, not him, not him. And Samuel says to Yishai, do you have any more sons? It's like, David, like he's with the sheep in the field. So he says, call him. Like, why would you want him? And he comes, and Samuel himself takes a look at David, and he sees him, and who does he look like? He looks like Esau. He looks like our arch enemy. It says he was ruddy complected, kind of short, squat, not your kingly kind of like him. He's the candidate. And Samuel's is like him. And God says, you look at the outside. I see his beautiful eyes. I see who he really is. That's him. Anoint him. And everyone was like, you've got to be kidding. So even with not only just the line of Ruth coming in, but within the house of David, it's within the house of Yishai itself is the question on like the least wanted of the least wanted. In Hallel, we talk about the stone that was the despised stone becomes the what's it called, the cornerstone or the whatever for the art. It becomes the foundation stone for all of it. It's like, you thought it was to be rejected? No, you didn't look right. You didn't look right. So our marching orders are, it's like, so what are we supposed to do? Because we stand at Sinai and we say, Na'aseh v'nishma. We're going to do it and we're going to listen. We're going to collect those sparks. We're going to get those rest of those 86. We're going to lead a life of such holiness that'll just like attract. So it's like, so what does that mean? So I'm also thinking of it in terms of, and this did not come from Rabbi Gladstein at all. This is just me and like how my little mind thinks. Remember, you used to take a magnet and go in the sandbox or whatever, and it would pick up all of the filings of the metal. It's like so cool. Okay, so cool. So I think of it in that way. It's like, how do you pick up the sparks? You become a magnet. You become a magnet. And you become a magnet by strengthening our magnetic force. And our magnetic force is done through our strength in Torah. The more we are ambassadors for Torah and the more we lead a Torah life, it's an indirect thing. This does not mean that we don't, which is interesting. We don't proselytize. We don't stand on any corners, on any soapboxes. We don't have any mega church. We don't have any of that. We are each our own magnetic force. And what we do will attract the sparks that need to be attracted, whatever it is. I don't know what they are. But we do that, we will attract it. And then we'll have it, we'll collect them, and then we'll have it. And there you have it. And that will be the completion. And when we get to that point, we will have redeemed all 288 sparks, whatever that exactly means. We will have collected them from all the places around the world. And I know that many of us here are still in the United States, but our ultimate homeland is the land of Israel. That is the place where this ultimately all comes together in the clearest way for all of humanity to see. You kind of like think like, you've got to be kidding. I'm not really seeing that, but that actually is the end game. So that's where we're heading, is toward that. Whether you or I end up being those people, that's where it's going. So all the other places the sparks have been collected and they're still being collected. And I'm not saying that we're done with totally with France. There's still people coming from there, and Spain and Argentina and Chile and lots of other places. So it's not necessarily, we shouldn't necessarily think of it as only being geographically bound. It is our global task to do this. And each of us is a magnetic force in our own world. It's actually a really good plan, kind of like branch banking. It doesn't really do so much good to have everybody just in one place. So for the collection process is go out, spread out, and be that magnetic force in your life and in your world. And that's how it will get done. And just to say, this doesn't mean that it needs to be done in the land of Israel too. There are many things and many situations that are not yet redeemed, which is why even if you are sitting and having your Seder in the old city of Jerusalem, staring at the Kotel, at the end of your Seder, you say, Shana Haba'ah b'Yerushalayim Habnuya. Next year in rebuilt Jerusalem. So we're there, but we're not totally there. The sparks the Jews left, how many sparks did the Jews leave with from Egypt? 202. And that's from the word Erev Rav. The word Rav, meaning a lot, is Reish 200, Bet 2, 202 from the 288, gives us our 86 remaining in the word Elohim. So those are our numbers for the opening of the book of Numbers of Bamidbar. And to just kind of put a final cap on that, to really make the point, is, it really would have been easier to get the Torah in the land of Israel. Let's just go and be there and get the Torah and have everything like all kind of in one place. Build a temple, have it there, and let's do it. But the Torah is specifically given in the Midbar, is the wilderness. in no man's land, in no man's land. The Jewish people at some level are no man's land people. We don't belong really anywhere other than in the land of Israel. We don't actually belong. We're the wilderness people, which, if you think about some things, and this is not to justify it at all, it's horrific. But think about Jewish people who lived in Iraq for like 1,000 years, that Iraqis would say, you don't really belong here. Or the French, or the Polish, or the Spanish, Jews lived there for however many years, you don't really belong here. And we were all offended by that. It's like, how can you say that? My family has been here for thousands of generations. Do you know they're actually telling us the truth? You don't belong here. Because not that they should be killing us or doing anything bad, but when they say that, they're actually right. We don't belong there. It's like, no, we just came to collect your sparks. And then it's like, then actually we don't really have a permanent place there. We're not meant to be there permanently. We're meant to be there to like do our thing, collect the sparks, and then we're meant to move on. So it's kind of interesting that sometimes our enemies have that message. You're different than everybody else. When you look at the United Nations, I don't know if it's still true, whatever's going on there, but Israel was like the only nation not counted in some list of nations that account for something. It's like, that's right. We're not really one of the 70 nations. We are other. We are other because we have a different job. We're kind of the core trying to hold everything else together. So the core trying to hold everything else together is not one of the parts that is being held together. It is what is holding everything together. So that's the metaphor. So it's a little weird. We are in the center with the 70 surrounding us, and we're trying to hold everybody else together. And when we can do that, we will be able to reach the place that we are meant to reach. Other questions? I know this is like kind of mind-blowing, but I think it's really helpful in this kind of very broad way. Dale.
I just had a comment that came to when you were talking about root and adding the hey to become Torah. For me, when I think when you're writing in Hebrew and for God, for Elohim, it's hey with a little apostrophe. So to me, adding the hey was showing how attached she was to God and how beautiful God was in her life. And then
Beautiful.
To King David, why God picked him as a ancestor, and I said the other way around, but
descendant, yeah.
Of Ruth, who had that hey to make it Torah and that love of God, and he passed that love to David. So that's what I was
beautiful
thinking.
Absolutely. And it wasn't like just to say Yishai, Jesse, is considered one of the people who died without sinning, that he was one of the few people who never sinned in his life. So it's not like that there was something. This is where the Cinderella metaphor breaks down considerably. He was not like the evil stepmother. Okay, so he was a righteous person, and it's a bigger story about why David was rejected. But the fact was that he was, but Ishai was not culpable. So there were other descendants of Ruth. So there could have been other people, but this went specifically, and maybe even because you had like the rejected of the rejected. It's like, how rejected can you be? That's the very person who is actually going to be the one to be the final piece in the puzzle, which is just really fascinating that is it. Most people have, and even just so we know, even in King David's own time, never mind Ruth being rejected as a Moabite, there were people, which had the whole thing to do with why Jesse, a bigger story we'll study sometime. There were questions on King David his whole life about whether he was really a legitimate king. Is he legitimate? And it's retroactively people, they're also saying, and then did he sin? And was he really, and the Moabite, blah, blah, blah. There's like all sorts of things like, is he really the one? Is he really the one? So this skepticism, and is this really the person? And is this really redeemable? That seems to be a question that stays with us. And that's where we're supposed to be looking. We're supposed to be looking in our own lives, in the world, and trying to fix things and bring them back. And how is it that God would want us to do it? And he gave us the instructions for this in the midbar. It's sometimes it reminds me of when you added the rest of the phrase after tikkun olam. What is the translation? B'malchut Shaddai. Malchut means the kingdom. Shaddai is another name of God. It's the Shaddai is the shin that's on your mezuzah is the name of God. That's Shaddai. It means the one who said, like the word Dayenu, the aspect of God that said it's enough. Shaddai. So that's one of the names of God. That's the kingdom of God there. Going back to, have you ever been on to a conference or to I don't know, I'll say like a Jewish retreat. We used to have a women's retreat here in Denver. It was very successful. One of the things that made it successful, in my opinion, is that it didn't take place at anybody's synagogue. It was at the JCC Ranch Camp. It was at someplace. It was somebody else's. It wasn't anybody. It was no one group's place. And that made it, I think, created a little midbar experience of like, this is open for everybody. And I think having the Torah being given in the midbar is a place not only like, oh, it's open, but it means it's open. It's for everyone. We're not having an exclusive club here, that you can't join, you can't be a part of it. This is only for us. It's like, no, this is for all of humanity. And we know that in the future, and when we talk about people who are affiliated with Noahide congregations, there are people who affiliate with that, and they learn Torah, and they learn the Torah that applies to them, but they learn other Torah as well. Just like we learn Torah that applies to the Kohanim. I'm not a Kohen, I don't need to know that. So they learn Torah, and they learn specifically about the laws that apply to them. It's for everybody. So giving it in the midbar is the ideal metaphor for what this is all about. It's open, it's available for everyone. And that's our goal. We're not secreting it away and taking it just for ourselves. Our goal is to serve humanity, and boy, the world has not necessarily gotten that message yet. Annette.
I had a question, and I didn't want to interrupt, but it takes you back to something you said right before this about God's name of Shaddai, and the Dai being like in Dayenu, it's enough. And so I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit, the Shin with the Dayenu.
Sure. So yeah, it's the ones. So for example, in creation, it's the aspect of God that says what the boundaries and bounds and measurements should be of everything. That the sea only comes up to here, that we don't grow 15 ears, like all the things that are about definition of what are the limits on everything, and all of the, like all the specifications. Like when you see a product online and then you can click on something that gives you the specs of what the dimensions are, who decides that? Okay, so somebody decided that in the design, this is what it needs to be. So that aspect of God is the one who says that, the one who is the specific design person. Not person, design agent. It's also considered an acronym, just to say, for the mezuzah. Shaddai is also an acronym, Shin Daled Yud, Shomer Dalte Yisrael, which means the guardian of the doors of Israel, which makes sense to have it then on the mezuzah. Okay, but the Shin is also on the tefillin. Okay, so it's also on the head tefillin. Is the Shin. So different aspects of God, of how we relate, all one God, all one thing, but different aspects that we are connecting to. The other piece about Elohim, of giving the Torah, is it's not given by, or I shouldn't say, the aspect we're focusing on is Elohim. Elohim is associated with the aspect of judgment. The Yud He and Vav He name that we say Adonai is considered the Rachamim, the Rachmanis one. And Elohim it's also a word that's used like, for judges, Elohim. It says that's to convey to us that the Torah is not just like a nice suggestion. I have a little plaque that says these are not called the 10 suggestions, and I have a cartoon that has God handing Moshe a a bunch of like helium balloons, and like with written like on it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. He says, if they don't, if they don't get this message, come back and I'll engrave it in stone or something. So it's like, this is like, not optional, not optional. So Elohim giving us is like, this is what we're here for, folks. And we're celebrating the holiday, and it's the holiday that gets the least attention out of all of our major holidays. People are like, where's the cheesecake? I don't know. It's like, people don't even know what to do with it. It's like, this is the holiday where we say, I'm in. I am in, and I'm a spark collector. I'm going to turn myself into a magnet to bring that forth, because there is a purpose to creation. It's not just like God created the world and said, goodbye and good luck. I'll pop in and every once in a while see how you're doing. It's like, there is a purpose, and we're trying to get back to it. And that purpose is embedded in the very language of creation. As soon as it happens, and there's going to be a path, and that is just right. It's not just a good idea, it's the law. Exactly. It's not just a good idea. And people say like, oh, I like this law, I like that law, that one like resonates with me. It's like, sorry, that's not the way it works. Try telling that to the police officer. Red lights, just like, don't do it for me. I'm like more of a green light person. So it's like, doesn't work. So this is the holiday where we have to take this very, very seriously. This is Elohim speaking to us. And it's because it's not obligatory for the sake of being punitive. It is obligatory because it's essential. And if we're not doing it, no one else is. So it's our job. And we've been elected, and we said we would do it. Na'aseh v'nishma, we said we'd do it. And we promised our descendants that they would do it as well. And their souls were all present at that point, because someone said, how can I be obligated? I wasn't there. It's like, guess again, you were. So you were there and you said yes. And so here we go. And so we are having a renewal of our vows on Shavuot, where we say, that's right, I did sign up. I take another look at this. So God willing, we will do that, and we will all stand together. And the good news is, it's a collective responsibility on the Jewish people, which is why we care what other Jewish people are doing. It's not enough to say, okay, fine, you do your thing, I'll do my thing. It's like, that's not okay either. It's like, no, it takes all of us. That's why we're all here. So if we're here, that means the assignment has been given to us, and that we're not supposed to be, what is it, in one of the Dr. Seuss books, we're not supposed to be the shirkers. We can't be the shirker. We have each of us in our own place, because each of us lives in our own place, and we have been designated for the place you are. The place you are in is the place from where we do our work, wherever it is. And if we don't do it in our place, there's not somebody else who can do it, because we're in our place, which is why we're here. So God willing, Hashem should give us success. We should be hopefully inspired by the fact that we're almost there, and we will get there, and that the work is challenging work, but hopefully it's the good work. It's the work that we want to do, and it will be the biggest contribution to humanity that anybody could possibly make. So with that, I want to wish you a Chag Sameach, a wonderful Shavuot. Start Sunday night, Monday and Tuesday, and God willing, I will see you next Thursday. Anybody have anything else that they wanted to? Is there a way we should celebrate Shavuot at home if we aren't yet going to synagogue? Yes. The thing to do on Shavuot, if you are at home and not in synagogue, is to learn Torah. So it is a night, it says especially the Erev Shavuot, is to stay up later than you would normally stay up to learn Torah. There is a minhag, there's a custom to stay up all night, but you do not have to stay up all night. The goal is to show that you are excited, enthusiastic. You can also daven. You can do all the davening yourself, except for the things that are the divrei kedusha, the words of kedusha. So you don't say the kedusha that's part of the Shemona Esrei, or obviously any of the kaddishes or anything like that. But you can do all the davening at home, including Hallel. And the Torah reading you can see in the Chumash is the reading of the 10 Commandments on the first day. It's different on the second day, but the reading of the 10 Commandments is on the first day. So that and learning Torah and just making the commitment, go around humming Na'aseh v'nishma. I'll do it. I'm doing it.
Last year, when I realized I'd be home doing, by myself, and I guess Kenny went a little bits and pieces to Shul. I don't really remember what he was doing. I was doing my stuff by myself, but I ended up ordering the Koren, Koren Moxer for Shavuos, because the art scroll one, it turned out, was going to cost me more than the cost of the book to get it shipped to me in time. And I wanted a Moxer because it's too hard flipping back and forth through the Siddur. I like having everything all in a row. But the Koren Moxer is edited by and introduced by Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, now of blessed memory, which is still just mind-boggling. And it's fascinating. It's the most incredible read, like history of the Jewish people, and so I ended up ordering all the Koren Moxorim for all the holidays, because he does this incredible intro history,
Beautiful.
divrei holiday thing. Plus it's got all the pieces and parts and all the order of everything, and you don't have to flip through the book. It takes you straight from davening, into the Torah portion. You get to just read everything, and it's there in English and in Hebrew, and it's really amazing, and it's possible. And I got it on Amazon really fast, and so I'm advertising it because
Thank you. Thanks,
amazing.
Annette. Thank you. Yeah, the Koren things are really, really good. I mean, I happen to have a full set of the art scrolls, so I probably am not going to get it, but it's ever so tempting, I have to tell you. But yeah, if you haven't gotten a machzor for any of the holidays, the Koren is really a beautiful way to go. So yes, and learning Torah. I mean, basically we're saying, I'm in, because it's considered our wedding day with Hashem, and the Torah is our ketubah. So it's like a bride should want her ketubah. A bride should want her wedding contract. And so it's like, these are the words of my lover. That's why, we focus on this. It's like, if you're bored at your wedding, I'm not sure how much that bodes well for your relationship. So it's like, this is the night to show some enthusiasm about what we're doing. But again, you don't have to stay up all night, but, and I'll just share one thing about that and then we'll go, because I know, it's called Tikkun Le'el Shavuot, a repair of the night of Shavuot. It says because Moshe had to wake the Jewish people in the morning to take them to get the Torah, and that they should have been up all night. So on one hand, so we fixed that. But on the side of the good of the Jewish people, it says the reason they were sleeping is they knew that they were going to get the Torah, which was becoming in a state of prophecy. They understood prophecy, that you had to be asleep, that you didn't receive prophecy while you were awake. You had to be asleep, and that God would come to them in their sleep. And so that's what they misunderstood, is that Torah is prophecy for an awake person, not a person who's in a trance, not a person who's asleep, not a person who's in some sort of altered state of consciousness. Torah is for a person who is awake, alert, and standing at attention. So that's why it's called Ma'amad Har Sinai, standing at Sinai. This is not some people say like, oh, maybe the Jews were all hallucinating. They had a big party the night before. It's like, go get your story somewhere else. That's the whole point, is that we were awake, alert, and ready to receive it, and not in a state of slumber. So yes, it's true that other prophets had that, but not for the giving of Torah. So the giving of Torah is meant to be, you have to be at your full wits when you receive the Torah. So Mazel Tov on our wedding, and we should all enjoy and feel a sense of inspiration about what our job is. It's not easy. It's not easy, but as I said, it's the good work. It's the only real work there is. Everything else is window dressing. Okay. All right. Have a wonderful Yom Tov. If anybody else have any questions, feel free to ask. And otherwise, we'll say goodbye. Yes, Darlene.
Thank you, Ellyn.
Thanks, Marcia. Yes, Darlene.
Yeah, I was just thinking when you said we left Mitzrayim with 202, so the balance of 86 over this big stretch of time. We are in the home stretch, and I equate this a lot to losing weight. Not that I've been so successful, but over years, it always gets, when you get to the last pounds, it's so hard, it's so challenging. But I feel like we're getting close, and Um, like right now, I'm hearing booms out there and going, I don't know what the right answer is to this here in Israel or whatever, but we all have our work to do, and it's getting harder. It's getting hard.
It's getting harder, and you are right. And it's hardest at the end. It is hardest at the end. It's like in anything, you know, I think we talked about before, you know, someone who's worked on their PhD in something and their ABD, all but dissertation. It's like finishing up the last part. The first work is the easier work. The last work is the hardest work, but you're also at the end. The same metaphor is used for giving birth, you know? Okay, it's hard at the beginning, morning sickness, etc. And then your middle months are kind of okay. And when is it hardest? Right before the birth. It's just like when you're in transition, right before there's really going to be something, that's when the woman screams out, I'm not having this baby. It's like, oh yes, actually you are, like momentarily. So we're there. That's why it's called Chevle Mashiach, the birth pains of the Mashiach, is that when we are in the final times, that's actually when it's the hardest. But it also means that's when we're the closest. So as I say, fasten your seatbelts. It's a hard ride, but it's a good ride, and we're almost there. We're almost there. And we can speed it up.
Right. Well, have a good Shabbos, everyone, and a good Yantif.
Good Shabbos, good Yantif. I look forward to seeing you all next week.
You too,
Bye-bye.
Darlene.
Thanks,
Darlene, did you make Aliyah?
Yes, Darlene made Aliyah.
Wow.
3 weeks ago. Yeah.
When?
3 weeks ago.
Mazel tov.
I only can't, thank you so much. It's just sort of, I mean, it's amazing, but it's, you know, coinciding with being here, getting out of Bidud, and then quarantine, and then Maroon, and now this. I have no regrets. We're very happy to be here. Don't get me wrong, but it's like, we just kind of took for granted we're gonna, you know, come and we're experiencing everything
At once. Did you buy an apartment?
Like, you know, yeah, it's amazing. No, we're in a rental right now. But we're keeping kind of low key. If you can believe, we've been in Israel 3 weeks now. We've yet to be in Yerushalayim. People have kind of.
Wow.
Yeah. So
where are you? Are you in? Where are you?
I'm sorry if I'm boring. If anybody wants to get off, please don't let me hold you up. Ramat Beit Shemesh.
So I have friends that made Aliyah and are living in Ramat Beit Shemesh. Their last name is Schiller. It's Yehudis and Yehezkel Schiller, and they're wonderful, wonderful people.
My husband met them the other day. I recognize that name. Are they from Baltimore?
They have an apartment here in our building. They're from Atlanta. She was from Atlanta originally, and he was from Seattle. This was a second marriage. But they're very, very dear friends and dear people. So I hope you get to meet her. It would be a great shidduch.
Okay, maybe.
Give my best when you do meet them.
Okay, maybe you can private, whatever, we'll figure out a way. Okay. Sorry, didn't want to.
No, it's so good to hear, you know, I mean, it's inspiring to hear that you have done this.
I have to tell you, my husband and I had it on our back burner agenda for a lot of years, but a lot of this Yasher Koch goes to Ellyn, our dear Ellyn. Last June, I wish I could remember, I have a really terrible memory, but there was something that happened either in this class or on the Tuesday class that just it was during Corona, and it just was very empowering. And it was about, I don't even know what it was. It was just something about activating certain things that you have, not just talking about it, but doing it. And after that, and my husband and I were around in the house a lot because of Corona. We're like, we got to go online. We got to start looking at, let's go to the Nefesh site. And less than a year later, we are here for Baruch Hashem.
Are both your girls there too?
Ellyn is a very good inspirational person.
You were ready. You were ready.
She's changed with Hashem's help. It's changed her life, and we have 2 daughters here. Can I know her? A lot of grandchildren.
Baruch Hashem. That's great.
Right now, we have a daughter expecting any time now, and she lives like the way to the hospital is a little precarious. From Beitar to Yerushalayim, you go through a lot of Arab villages, and we're on call to be babysitters, so we're, you know, just thinking of logistics. It's, yeah, please God, it'll all be good. But
So you have a daughter in Beitar. That's beautiful.
one in Beitar and one in Ramat Beit Shemesh.
Wow. And anybody still in Dallas?
Houston,
Oh,
Jessica.
Houston.
We have
Okay.
Beth, and then Lisa, sorry, everyone, you can get off, whatever. We have
I was
another.
gonna say, I feel so bad because I actually have to go because I have an appointment that I have to go to.
Oh,
I'm so
okay.
sorry.
I just wanted to tell you,
Okay,
Ellen,
be
I
well.
finally gave that piece to my son and his wife.
Oh, good. And they liked
They
it?
loved it. They loved it. They loved it. And also, I just wanted to share with you, I've been learning Mishlei. So chapter 18, Pasuk 16, it's very interesting. You know how the Jews keep trying to accommodate the nations of the world by saying, oh, we give you all this health stuff and we give you this, we give you these gifts. And they're saying, we don't want you here. We don't want you here. So Rav Hirsch always says that it's best for people to just be in the background and not try to, accommodate all these great people. If you'll see in the pasuk where Gedolim can mean either great people or princes, something like that. So far better to modestly remain in the background and to be asked, why are you staying behind and not coming up front, than to be given to understand upon finally having succeeded in approaching the great person that you really do not belong there. So I found the synchronicity of learning that pasuk today and all the different ramifications of the way the words are with what you were talking about today. Very interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah, just another thing to think about. Thank you for a great share. It was really wonderful.
My pleasure.
Always.
Have a wonderful, wonderful Yontif and Shabbos,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe everywhere.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Darlene, I put my phone number in the chat. Did you see it? It's a direct chat to you.
Okay,
It wasn't to everybody. It
I'll
was
go write
to
it
you.
down, yeah,
Okay.
okay, thank you.
So send me a WhatsApp so that I have it. Have yours.
All right, will do.
Great. Okay. And Mazel
Thanks. All
Tov
right, bye,
again.
everyone.
All right, Darlene, did you get it? I don't want to disconnect to end the meeting before.
Got it.
You do?
Great.
Got it. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Bye. Thank you for coming, everybody, from
Thank
everywhere,
you.
across the
And
country,
thank
across the
you.
world.
Across the world now.
Yeah. You see my flag out of the fridge?
I love it.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Be safe going to where you need to go. Okay. Bye.